Welcome to Circle City Conversations, where the heart of Indianapolis comes alive through the stories of its people. Join us as we explore our city, one insightful conversation at a time.
Alex Limontes here, lawyer and host of this show, Circle City Conversations, where I sit down with lawyers, doctors, bar association members, and past plaintiffs and clients to talk about intricacies of personal injury litigation and just what's going on around our city here in Indianapolis. This episode is brought to you by Hurst Limontes, a personal injury law firm in Indiana. Founded in 1981, Hurst Limontes is one of the few firms whose practice focuses exclusively on personal injury cases, with more than 116 years of combined experience among our lawyers. You can trust us to handle your case with valuable and extensive expertise. We have the knowledge and the resources to handle any case, from a basic car crash case to a complicated products liability case. No matter how complex or significant the injury, we aim to make the process as stress-free as possible for our clients. Our attorneys have represented thousands of injured clients and obtained hundreds of millions of dollars in settlements and verdicts. If you or a family member have been in a personal injury accident and need an attorney in Indiana, contact our team at hurstlimontes.com or email alimontes@billhurst.com. I have Chad Franzen here of Rise 25, who has done thousands of interviews with successful entrepreneurs and CEOs and probably some lawyers too. And we flipped the script, and he will be interviewing me today.
Hey, Alex, how are you? Thanks so much. Great to be here.
Great. Thanks.
Hey, I know we're here to talk about process and procedure, kind of what you do. I know you help people who have been hurt or had a family member that's been hurt or killed in an accident. Just tell me, once that happens, once somebody has been in an accident or has a family member who has been in one, what should they do? What would you recommend that they do?
Sure. Well, the first thing I would do, like, let's say you're actually on site, which if you're on site, if you've been in the crash, then you're probably got adrenaline just coursing through your veins, you know? So, and it's hard to focus and think when you're at that point. But if let's say you're a family member that shows up on site after, take as many pictures as you can. I mean, that's what we have cell phones for nowadays. Your cell phone after a crash is like your best friend. Documenting license plates, street signs. If the cars were left in the same kind of position immediately after the impact, just get back, take a picture, or take a video. There's a lot of the police will show up. Obviously, eventually, you have to use your cell phone to call them. You know, and a lot of times they have body cam footage. But the biggest reason why these pictures and video and this visual evidence is so important is because, you know, we're lawyers, but we're not there at the scene. So we have to, in order to be able to tell our client's story about what happened to them, we have to be able to see it and visualize it. And let's say I've got a client that shows up with no pictures versus someone that shows up with 25, 30 pictures. I can take those pictures with me, you know, with my iPad over to the scene, and I can kind of recreate it and see what happened. So documenting everything as much as possible while you're on the scene. Not just pictures, but also when the police show up, especially if nobody's like bleeding out or dying on site, you know, when the police show up, they usually will separate people and say, okay, you know, what happened? Say to the one party what happened, and then say to the other party what happened. Okay. And if there's a witness that's stuck around, the police officer should get that witness's information. But remember, I said should. Okay. And it just doesn't always happen that way. And it's not really the fault of the police or anything like that. They just have so much going on. And especially in a case where, you know, people are hurt, but, you know, they're not under immediate threat of losing their life or any serious injury. In those situations, the police officer's job is to document everything that happened, but make sure they do it in a manner that's not going to disrupt traffic and also get people back on the road, get the traffic flowing normally. Because you're hurt, you've been in a crash, okay, and that's what's in your mind right now. But the police officer's mind is, okay, this is probably the third or fourth crash report I've taken all week. All right. I got to get this road going again. I got to get people back home to see their families for dinner, lunch, whatever it might be, So they can't always get all of the information. And I keep talking about, gathering evidence and getting information. Insurance companies, that's who you're dealing with. They have this insatiable appetite for information. And the more that we can get over to them and make their job easier, the more likely we are to be able to find a successful resolution for our client. So, and on the flip side, I was just talking about an accident, where there wasn't any serious injury or death. If there is an accident with serious injury or death, then in those cases, the insurance company sometimes already has people out there doing their investigation. I know in a lot of semi accidents, tractor trailer, 18 wheeler, everyone calls them something different, but big commercial vehicles on the road. The generally, if there's an accident with a big truck, injuries are bad because it's a big giant truck, probably hitting a small car. And they will sometimes even send lawyers out there on site. There are lawyers on call that they will call up and say, okay, one of our drivers got into a bad wreck. It's on Interstate 74. I need you to get out there. Now, think about it this way. The insurance company they're already starting to protect themselves and build their case. Yet the plaintiff, who's either hurt or a family member of someone that got killed, they're just worried about being hurt or killed or what they have to deal with. They're not necessarily looking at it as, okay, we've got a possible insurance claim here. Okay. And we're going to have to do everything we can, to really document the file. So we always tell people that, in most cases, they've already got their lawyers on it. They've already got their people working on it. So having your own is only going to benefit you as someone that was hurt and is trying to get treated fairly, So that would be like the first thing that I would do on site. If you're able to do it, document everything that you possibly can.
And what did you say to do with the witness?
I'm sorry. I didn't say this. This is important because a lot of times on the crash report, and I'm just talking about car crashes, but this applies, by the way, to slip and fall accidents and all kinds of accidents. We've done everything. So if there is a witness involved, it is very important for the injured party or a family member to get that person's name and phone number and information, because that may not always show up on the crash report. And I'll give you an example. We had a disputed liability. And what I mean, disputed liability, the other side was disputing it was their fault that they caused the crash. We had a case up in Westfield, Indiana, and it was a left-hand turn case. The defendant was turning and crashed into our client's car. And the police showed up and they actually had drones out in the area, like scanning the area, taking photos and everything. But we got that information. But when you look at the crash report itself, it didn't list but one witness. Well, there was 8 total witnesses that we found after the fact. Okay. And fortunately, the police, the Westfield police, took individual witness statements, but they never put them on the actual crash report. And it wasn't until we started getting information provided by our client. That was the key. Our client, he gave us the first witness's name and we called that person. They were like, oh, call so-and-so. They were there, And so we were able to track down witnesses and ultimately show that the defendant was the one that actually caused the crash. And then we were able to recover money for our client.
So the person who has been in the accident has all sorts of documentation. The insurance company likely, maybe not. If it's a serious accident, they probably do, has all sorts of documentation. Where do we go from here?
Okay. So now you've got as much evidence as you can possibly collect. All right. Then obviously there is treatment going on because there's usually an injury. Okay. I always tell folks after they've collected their documents and they've got an injury, you have to call a lawyer. Okay. You have to call a lawyer because most of us, okay, that do this kind of work, we operate on a contingency fee basis, which means we don't charge a fee unless we can recover money for the client. Okay. Now, this is where, I'm going to talk a little bit about the difference in some certain lawyers and law firms. this is where some lawyers have gotten really good at making their money. You know, a lot of people people that aren't lawyers don't understand the difference between a good marketing lawyer and a good lawyer. Okay. A good marketing lawyer is a great businessman, or business person, you know, but they're not trial lawyers. Okay. And because they've put all of this money into advertising, they basically what they do is they increase their contingency fee more than what we would normally charge and pass that advertising cost onto the client. Okay. So, because billboards, Chad, they're not cheap. And when you've got 100 of them in one state, you know, that's not cheap, you know, or commercial ad time on TV, you know, on broadcast, you know, ABC, NBC, those networks, that's not cheap. You know, even OTT stuff like YouTube TV, you know, and Hulu, you know. So because lawyers like us, we operate on a contingency fee, you should always, whenever you're looking at a lawyer and evaluating what they're going to do for you, look at the contract and see if they increase their fee as the case progresses. Okay. Our fee is static. Okay. We charge a third, whether we settle the case before suit or go to trial or even appeal it. Okay. In addition, we always guarantee our clients that the attorney fee is not going to exceed what they get in their pocket if we can settle the case, because most of them will settle statistically. So, you know, when you're looking and evaluating for an attorney and who to hire, look at the fee structure. It's got to be there in writing. And if they're not giving it to you in writing, you need to go to another lawyer. Okay. And look at what they're charging you, because some of these lawyers are charging 50%. I mean, can you imagine that? You know, if you settle a case, 50% to the lawyer, you pay the medical bills, and then turn around, the client gets nothing. And that's not fair. I mean, that's the whole point that we're doing this, you know, to try to help these folks. And the only way that we can help them is to get them money, you know, and the more money that we can get them, the more help that we've provided to them. Okay. So whenever you're looking at a lawyer, you know, you obviously do your research online, see what other clients are saying about them, look at their reviews. Are they rated, ranked by, you know, verified organizations like U.S. News and World Report, Best Lawyers in America, or Best Law Firms in America? We've been best lawyers and best law firms since the 80s. I think my partner has been best lawyer. Super Lawyers, all of these kind of organizations, they look at some of the best lawyers that do that kind of work in that area. And so, you know, when you're hiring a lawyer, it's like getting a doctor. You know, you don't just go get the cheapest person, you know, and you certainly try to do your research. You want to hire the best person, you know, and with the internet now, it's just all there readily available. So, you know, do your research, look at the fine print. It's really important to look at the fine print. Just because a law firm claims to be the largest law firm in the universe doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to do good by their client. Okay. Because those firms, they resolve cases for the average. They look at a case and they're like, okay, what's the average that we can get on a case like this? Because it's a business. They're focused on how much time can I save and efficiency, you know, versus when we look at a case, we look at the cases individually on a case by case basis. Okay. Now we do consider statistics and averages, but every case is different. And, you know, if we have to fight on a case, then we will. Now, consider that concept and think about what the insurance companies are doing. They are averaging these cases. They're looking at these cases on the average. They're saying, okay, well, on average, this case is worth this. So a lot of those bigger advertising law firms, they're operating the same way as the insurance company on the same wavelength. So you're basically being treated the same way. You may as well just not have a lawyer if you're going to go hire a firm that's going to treat you like that. You know, these are all very kind of important things to consider and factor that a lot of people don't know, because a lot of folks don't know the difference between a good marketing lawyer and a good lawyer.
So I have been in one accident where, you know, a guy blasted me as I was going through the intersection. My wheel went hurtling down the road, and I was somewhat hurt. Not serious injuries, but the car was significantly damaged, and it didn't even occur to me to call a lawyer in that instance. And the guy who hit me didn't have any insurance. What did that cost me? Not calling a lawyer that offers the kind of services that you offer. Roughly.
Well, I think what it would cost you is your opportunity to be heard. Do you know what I mean? Like everyone, for the most part, when I give people money, they're happy. I mean, everyone's happy to get money, but when you consider what they had to deal with before and then what they're getting as a substitute, it's apples to oranges, it's a poor substitute, So, but I will say this, there's statistics out there by the American Bar Association. They represent all lawyers, not just us, the plaintiffs' attorneys that help injured people, but the defense bar and everyone, contracts attorneys, business lawyers. They've run statistics that show, or they've got statistics that show that if you hire a personal injury lawyer in, even a standard case, let's say you go to the hospital and then do a couple follow-ups, you are more likely to get 7 times what you would have gotten on your own, So again, at the end of the day, it's about getting compensation money for our clients. We can get more than the person can on their own. And even a smaller case, just going to the emergency room, that has value. Sure, it doesn't have the value that a double brain bleed in a coma case does, but it does have value, And so the reality is that that disrupted your life to an extent. Absolutely. No way, no doubt about it. And that disruption came in the form of probably having to deal with rental car and all that stuff, get your car fixed, probably, maybe get some treatment or minimal treatment or follow up with a primary care doctor, all of that stuff really was stuff that you would never have to deal with if it wasn't for the crash. And that's why we have insurance. If it's a $5,000 claim or a $5 million claim, they still have to pay out just compensation, And so, even in cases like that, I've had people call me and they're like, the lawyer, they just said it wasn't really that big. And I said, if it's a big deal to you, then it's a big deal to me, because our law firm, especially here, is built and modeled to move cases, car crash cases, especially, because when it comes to dealing with, and I'll talk a little bit about this later, the more that we can do for the insurance company to make their job easier, the adjusters, the more likely we are to find a resolution that's fair to them, in the case.
So somebody gets into a crash, maybe like the one I described, or something more serious or less serious or whatever, but they're aware of you and
Yes.
they're ready to come to you. What happens then once they get a hold of you and they have, maybe sufficient documentation?
Sure. So the first thing is they don't need any documentation. So we usually get all that ourselves, even the crash report. The crash report, you have to go to buycrash.com, and it's $12. Okay. So no big deal, but we do that. Those are litigation expenses. We tell the client we're going to spend money on this, and this. Okay. So client comes to us. Let's say they call the office. We usually get a brief, I don't know, maybe 10, 15-minute intake from one of the staff here. And we have everyone speaks, not everyone, but about 40% of us speak Spanish here. So we can do both, and I speak Spanish as a Spanish-speaking attorney. So they call the office, we do a quick intake, and then they are immediately transferred over to a lawyer. And that, I think, is a big distinction between us and, going back to those bigger, more big business firms. Because they operate like a business, they have like a pre-litigation department. So you talk to like a case manager, and then ultimately you get passed on to one lawyer, and then you may get passed on to another lawyer, and then you get passed on to another lawyer. There was, I was listening to a podcast, and a guy named Joey Coleman was on it. Never lose a client. And he had a great analogy about, courting someone and then they fall in love with you, and then you hand them off. You're like, hey, here's Bob. This person's going to take care of you now, when you're the one that really kind of courted them. So I've always seen that as an issue with just generally with law firms. So what I try to do to combat that is when the intake comes in, you get a lawyer that talks to him. That lawyer, every lawyer that answers the phone and does intakes here in this office is a trial lawyer and a litigator, and will basically take the case from beginning all the way to the end. So you have the same lawyer on the case the entire time. Okay. Sometimes I will step in as the managing partner and take a deposition, go to a mediation and try to help get a case resolved, or give the client a good option to help resolve the case. Try cases. I love trying cases, love being in the courtroom. I was just in Union County a couple of weeks ago for a hearing. I love to argue in front of judges. So, as most lawyers do. But like I said, it's kind of like, I like to call it like a medium-sized boutique approach where we have these lawyers that work with their paralegals and their secretaries, but it's the same person. So it's almost like you're calling like a solo practitioner, we have all the resources that all the big firms have, but you have the same lawyer working on your case. So you have that individual attention, you have that personal touch, and you have, that if you pick up the phone, you're like, all right, Katie Karras is my lawyer. Is Katie there? And if she's not, she needs to call him back. And if she doesn't call him back, which that never happens, then they call me, and I always tell everyone, all my clients, if you have an issue, if you have a question, I've got other people on my team that are helping me kind of move the case forward. But any big picture questions, I'm glad to answer. Any little picture questions, I'm glad to try to help you with, because at the end of the day, it's about the service, the level of service you provide to these folks. That's what they're going to remember. There's a reason why I don't have any billboards or commercials or anything like that. Yet we can still sustain a law firm of 6 attorneys and 14 staff. There's a reason why, and it's because of the level of service that we give to people. They are our biggest, they sing our biggest praises. So yeah, you call the office, you talk to a lawyer, it'll be the same lawyer. The lawyer will tell you, we can help you or we can't. Okay. And then generally, we did this differently since COVID. We all had to go remote. Used to be the clients would come in and I'd meet with them and, we'd sign everything, but lately we've had I had one gentleman today, he's up in Chicago, but he wants me to send him the agreement via DocuSign, So, and I mean, you and I are here virtually, you know what I mean? So technology has really helped, I think, with the intake process as far as capturing, the leads that come in, because a lot of that stuff used to slip through. But, we can usually get an agreement out to the client, a fee agreement, which is, I've simplified it. It's one page. It's not, some lawyers send these 6-7 page long agreements. And I just tell the client in one page, this is what I charge. It's a contingency fee. If we have to pay back doctors or liens, we will. All right. And that's basically it. Just what do I charge? We send that off. Once they sign that, they are officially our client, and then we can take over from there. We will start the process there of communicating with folks and things like that.
So as you're dealing with, before they decide to take the case to trial, as you're dealing with insurance companies and their attorneys, are there kind of, like boilerplate areas where you expect them to kind of skimp on, especially if the person does not have representation of their own?
Sure. So, if you had, I would say, if I'm interpreting your question right, like common defenses you can expect. So remember, it's all about money, right? Mm-hmm. And that's their language. Insurance companies speak money. That's their language. Okay. So anything that they can do to save money on that claim, they will do it. Okay. For example, most of us over the age of 45 or 50, even 40, have degenerative changes in our spine. Okay. They call it degenerative disc disease. There's other names for it. Really what it is you're just getting older. You're not the same. I know I'm not the same. I would love to feel like I did back in my 20s, right? So that they would consider a pre-existing condition. And if they can look at another pre-existing condition and say, whoa, these injuries are not from this crash that we're responsible for paying for. They're from some condition, Susie had before the crash. We didn't cause it. So because of that, the damages are not as high and we won't have to pay you as much money. So the pre-existing condition is a big one. And then they also, a very, very common thing that you get, because a common injury in these cases is, I hate the term. I could do a whole episode on whiplash. I hate that term. It's like something that was like made up by lawyers. It sounds like something that was made up by lawyers, just, yeah. So, but it's essentially a neck strain, what the doctors would call it. And I like to just call it a neck injury because that's what it is. But in a muscle strain situation, okay, usually you get hurt, okay, you go to the ER, okay, then maybe you're still having some pain and soreness, let's say in your low back. You call your primary care doctor. I would always do that. Or if you have a chiropractor or someone that you trust that you see, call that person first, okay? And then they should get you in, or even do a telehealth appointment and be, okay, what's your problem? My back hurts, okay? Go see a chiropractor or go see a therapist. They will direct your treatment, okay? And then that, in a soft tissue case like that, it's common for the insurance company to hire a doctor. They hire their own doctors. They have their own doctors to say that, okay, Susie was hurt. We think that the hospital treatment is related. We think that the therapy is related to the crash. But after she got done with therapy, we don't want to pay for anything else. The problem is, after she got done with therapy, if she continued having issues, she was getting injections, pain injections, steroids, epidurals, possibly what's called a nerve ablation, which is where they take a laser and basically burn your nerve endings so you don't have to feel the pain. And that's just a minor procedure, not to mention a possible fusion where they, basically reconstruct the cartilage and the discs in your spine. So the insurance companies like to cut it off after a certain time, let's say 6 months. It's very common for them to have a report that says that. Because why? Because in most medical literature, a sprain strain injury heals after, let's say 6 weeks to 3 months. Okay. And because of that, anything after that would be more of a chronic permanent injury. Now, if you think about this, when they're looking at the cases and evaluating, what case is worth more? A permanent injury for a 30-year-old guy, or even 40-year-old person versus a 6-week injury for, the same person. Of course, it's worth more. So that is a common way that they'll come in the courtroom. Let's say I'm trying the case. I've done this so many times with them. It's the same thing. They'll come in the courtroom. We'll say, listen, it was our fault. We feel really bad about it. We shouldn't have done it. We admit liability. We caused the crash, but we don't think the person was hurt as badly as they're claiming they were, because for them, it makes them seem like they're being genuine, by saying that. But ultimately, they're really just trying to save money on the claim. So, the pre-existing condition, the sprain strain argument, gap in treatment. If someone doesn't go treat, I have a lot of clients that can't go treat because they don't have health insurance to pay for it. And they're not just going to keep going and running up a tab when the other side is, not paying, time is on their side, Chad. It is always on their side. They have more money and resources than anyone, really, when you're dealing with them in this situation, so time, the more that they can have someone, like, for example, like you, let's say you missed a bunch of work and you can't get back to work. Ultimately, you're going to get desperate. You need the money, our clients need it. The insurance companies, they don't need it. It's a write-off for them, what they pay out, So the more time that they can drag a case out, the more likely they are to get to the point where the plaintiff says, I'm done. Just give me whatever the hell you want to give me and I'm out of here. Okay. So, those are just some of the common defenses and issues that we have to deal with.
So at what point, to what benefit is there, for the insurance company to go to trial? Like where is that deciding factor? Where is that decision made?
Sure. I don't think, I've never worked for an insurance company. I don't know. My dad's an insurance adjuster, but we don't talk about that kind of stuff. He does property damage down in Florida. But I think that in my experience, seeing how these insurance companies operate, they don't like losing control of the outcome. When you put the case in front of a jury, you lose control. The jury takes that. They get to decide what it's worth. Okay. I think that's what motivates a lot of them to try to find a resolution. However, their decision to go to trial is usually based on a combination of factors, including most of them run software that it's called Colossus is one program, but basically it's claim evaluation software. So it tells, you put their injuries into this little computer and it tells you exactly what the cases were. The problem is, in my view, is that I don't have 6 computers sitting on that jury. I got 6 people, plus an alternate. So when I'm looking at a case, I'm not evaluating it like a machine or a computer. I'm looking at it as, what is a person going to do with this? When they see, I've got a case right now where his dad was holding his baby while the baby was dying in his arms. Just a horrible, sad situation. And he didn't have really any physical injuries, but imagine that. Like, I'm a dad, I got 4 kids. Like, this is a horrible thing, to have to deal with. And computers, that doesn't compute to them, whereas, and the software that they use, whereas, the human element is really, I think, what drives the value in the case. And that is the unknown for the insurance company. That's what they can't predict. That's what they don't know. Their computer can't tell them. That's why they generally don't like going to trial unless they think that they're going to win on liability. So can I backtrack a little bit here? I want to talk about, so I do negligence work. That's what I do. Negligence cases. That's like the legal term for it. Okay. So a negligence case is like a table, right? Okay. Table needs 4 legs to stand. Okay. You need a duty. Okay. You need a breach. You need causation and damages. Okay. So in a car crash case, I owe a duty to other drivers on the road to not drive like a complete idiot and cause a crash. Okay. So that's my duty. Okay. I breach that duty if I run a stop sign and cause a crash. Okay. If someone is hurt, then there's causation. I caused the accident, so I caused those injuries. Now that causation, that's where the insurance companies like to poke holes in that, so they can try to save some money. And then that kind of rolls into the damages aspect too, where they like to poke a lot of holes. Okay. Again, where they can save money. So if you don't have all 4 of those legs, your table doesn't stand, it falls. All right. And so in a lot of cases, you see situations where they won't admit liability or fault, knowing that they can try to leverage that on the damages end to save money, because Indiana is a comparative fault state, which means that if the plaintiff gets more than 50% fault, the person bringing the case, they get $0, a goose egg. However, if let's say the defendant gets 60% of the fault and the plaintiff gets 40% of the fault, the plaintiff's damages recovery is reduced by 40%. Okay. And so again, it's just for them, it's a statistics money game, numbers game, excuse me. They're looking at it like, I got to try this case. I got to try another 1,000 cases. If we can save a few bucks here and there on these cases, ultimately we're going to save a lot of money, as a company. So when it comes to trial, I mean, we don't try to, if there's a case that they think they can win on liability on fault, they will go try it, because for them, it's just for them, they just pay the money out and they like to send messages to people like me in the plaintiff's bar. And I've been doing this a long time. I know a lot of defense attorneys. I deal with all of them. And there is some messages going back and forth, not like subtle messages, like, hey guys, if you don't want to offer us anything fair, we're going to go try the case, or the same thing on the other side, but yeah, when it comes to trial, if we have a great case on liability and we just don't think they're being fair, we'll go try it.
As we kind of move toward wrapping things up here, can you tell us like a story, maybe a case that has been particularly memorable for you in this area where you were, quite pleased with what your client ended up getting from the insurance company?
Sure. It was a few years ago. It was a case with what was one of my associates' cases, but like I told you before, I step in to try them. So really nice guy, but he got into a crash on the interstate, and then the person that crashed into him ran, like from the scene, fled, not running, like in their car, drove off. So my client's on the side of the interstate because he just got slammed into and then pushed into a concrete median barrier. you know? And then this guy runs off. Fortunately, there was a state police officer near there. So they find the abandoned vehicle down the road. The guy wasn't there. Okay. The person that caused the crash. So come to find out that this other driver that caused the crash was uninsured. Now, when you get into an accident with an uninsured person, hopefully you have purchased uninsured motorist coverage, because that will cover you. That'll be your own personal policy that covers you. It's a big thing that a lot of people don't grasp. That'll be another episode. But, you know, they're like, why do I have to make a claim against my own insurance? Well, that's why you bought uninsured motorist coverage. In case another uninsured driver, which there's 17% in the state of Indiana are uninsured. In case another uninsured driver causes a crash with you, you can at least get compensated. So in my case, he made a claim against his carrier, and he had gaps in treatment. He didn't treat for a while. And another thing they love as a defense is another injury. So if you get in a crash and then you get another one, they blame the second one. They're like, no, this is not our responsibility. This is a second crash. He had a tree fall on him, actually. It was wild. And he was in the hospital forever. So he didn't have a tremendous amount of treatment, but he had a permanent injury. And he was one of the most genuine and amazing clients that I've ever had. And he just did a fantastic job in front of the jury. And he was suing his own insurance company. And it was funny because that same insurance company, it's a big national company. And he had $100,000 of insurance. And that's what he was paid. That's what he paid for. That's what he was entitled to. That's what I told the jury. I said, folks, give the man the benefit of his bargain. He's been a customer of theirs for 15 years, paying his premiums just in case something like this happened, you know? But now they're in here telling you he didn't treat for 29 days. He didn't, he's older, so he had pre-existing conditions, and he had another accident happen to him, okay? But the thing is that they didn't buy any of that. And I remember, because the defense hired an expert, and it's a person that I've worked with before. And so I took a page out of another real famous trial lawyer's book, and I basically told the jury, I said, they're going to bring this doctor in here, and he's going to try to wow you with all of this medical terminology and all of his knowledge and years of experience. And then he's going to pull out his little spine model, and then he's going to show you, you know, what his opinions are. Sure enough, the guy walked in, you know, had a bag with him, and then and then he pulled out the spine model, and he started talking to him. Every one of those jurors, even the alternate, they all turned and they looked at me, and they were like, "This guy is, you know, can predict the future. You know, this guy knows, you know, what he's talking about." So that was a great case. We tried it for 3 days. We asked the jury, we said, give our client $100,000. That's what he paid for, benefit of his bargain. And it was a tough case to get that kind of money on. Anyways, right before the jury came back, they offered our client $70,000. And I told him, I said, no, reject it. You know, he did. The jury came back with a $200,000 award. So they gave us twice what we asked for. Come to find out that the foreman, the foreperson on the jury, had the same exact insurance company that we were suing. He had been one of their insureds for years. And he was like, oh my God, I can't believe they did this to him. And I would hate for them to do this to us. And they actually wanted to give our client like $400,000. But one of the jurors, again, because you never know who you're going to get, one of the jurors, she didn't think that it was worth that much. And I thought she was going to be helpful for our jury because she herself had an ulnar injury, nerve injury. And I thought, oh, she's sympathetic. She knows what daily pain is like. No. And when I talked to her after the fact, basically her position on lowering the damages in the case was that nobody gave me any money when I hurt myself. But that's crazy, right? Like, they're not even supposed to consider that or think about it. But those are the kind of things you have to think about going into a jury. Those are the things that the insurance companies cannot compute. They can't do it. Those unpredictable factors. That's why they don't like going to jury trial. Okay. So that's just one. That was a great case. We're still dealing with that case too. So ongoing other issues, but yeah, that was a great case and a great result. And the client is just ecstatic over what we were able to do for him.
Yeah, that's a great story. Incredible. Twice the amount that you.
Yeah. And well, just one more thing. So that was my son's 5th birthday, the day that we were waiting for the jury. So I didn't miss his entire birthday, but boy, I was there in the courthouse until about 8 p.m. waiting for the jury to return the verdict. And then I rushed home. You know, I didn't even really get to celebrate with the other lawyers, rushed home to wish him a happy birthday that day. It's just Emmanuel, one of the he works with me here. He said this never worked with lawyers. He said this the other day. He's like, it's crazy when you hear about lawyers, you see them, but you don't really know how much they are like us until you work there and you are there with them, So I just thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can end it on that note. Is there anything else anybody should know as we kind of wrap it up here?
I would just say that the process is complicated. It can be difficult, but we are here to help. It's what we do. And, most of our clients, the biggest thing that they love about working with us is that they understood what was going on. We really break it down for them. We explain it to them. We tell them why these things are happening. And they really appreciate that.
Okay. Sounds good. Hey, Alex, great to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
So long, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Circle City Conversations podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on more future conversations.